to the 80/20 Baseball Podcast. The 80/20 Coaching Masterclass, our weekly get-together where coaches go from new to good and good to great, mastering the fundamentals and the art of coaching.
Welcome, youth baseball community. Great to be here with all of you this week, our weekly get-together. And this week, I'm really pumped up to have a fantastic interview guest. This is the first author that I've reached out to and asked to come on the podcast after reading their book. The book was that good. And so Kirsten Jones, the author of the book, Raising Empowered Athletes, a youth sports parenting guide for raising happy, brave, and resilient kids, is on this episode, part one of a two-part interview. Kirsten has her own podcast called Raising Athletes. She's about to launch a parenting course for youth athletes. And it sounds like she's working with Patrick Mahomes' mom on this project, on this course. She mentions during the interview that she's actually flying out to the NFL draft this week as part of the promotion process of launching that parenting course. I'll have all the links to that in the show notes as soon as it's available. And all the other ways to follow Kirsten I'll have in the show notes as well. And a side note real quick, on last week's episode, I mentioned that I had a tip to help avoid sending mixed messages to our players. And the tip is that it's very important as a coaching staff to be coaching each player in the same way. In other words, it's very important that the coaching staff decides to coach say, for example, a hitter and their swing the same way. It's so hard for players to get three different coaching messages at one practice or even during the same season, especially when it's the same skill or same action, such as hitting or pitching or fielding or throwing. It's very important to come to an agreement as a coaching staff and even as coaches working with the parents and outside resources like private pitching coaches and private hitting coaches. It's really important to be on the same page and coaching it the same way. And a lot of times this might include disagreement, but what's most important is that the message is consistent and similar for the player to avoid confusing them and having them try to work on three things at one time or even two different things or getting pulled in different directions as to what they should do with their swing or their pitching delivery, etc. This is hard, but it's very important to be on the same page as coaches, parents, and even those outside resources, like I mentioned, the private coaching. This is a big thing. It takes a little bit of digging sometime to see what a player might be getting taught elsewhere. But within the team, as a coaching staff, you could just quickly identify what's the main thing that each player on your roster is going to work on when they're hitting, and just everybody has that list. When they're pitching, what's the main thing or main two things that they're working on while they're pitching, their pitching delivery or ground balls or base running. I would cap it at 2. Those can evolve and change and shift. But if I asked any of the coaches on your coaching staff, any of the parents that are helping out, what's Johnny working on when he's hitting? Everybody should have the same answer or answers. All right. This is a little thing, but a big thing. So being on the same page with our coaching message to each individual player and within that, each individual skill that they're working on. This will help our players play with more confidence, more freely, and it's the right way to go about it when coaching up our athletes. All right, enough of me. Let's get into our interview with Coach Kirsten Jones. All right, I am here with Kirsten Jones, who is an expert in exactly what we talk about on this podcast. And I'm hoping we can learn a lot more from Kirsten, an author of a book that it was just amazing. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Kirsten, how are you doing?
I'm so good. Thanks, Coach Bo, for having me on. Excited to be here.
Oh, I'm pumped up. You're the first, we were just talking about this. You're the first person who I've read, and I read a lot of coaching books and things like that and youth sports books. You're the first person I've reached out to and said, and asked to be on the podcast. So thank you for taking the time. With that said, could you share with the listeners a synopsis of your backstory and your path to where you're at now?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I grew up in the 70s and 80s in a little town called Missoula, Montana, where I think most people of our generation, parents in their 50s and 60s now, played all the sports. So you played whatever was in season. In Montana, at least at the time, there weren't club sports. So we played whatever. I played basketball in the fall and volleyball in the winter, ran track in the spring, rode horses, skied, tennis, all the things. And had no expectations from my parents that I would ever play in college. That was not a thing. nor that they would think that I would want to pursue a career in sports. So it was just a great, well-rounded upbringing. In fact, they really focused more on piano and ballet, which was like nails on a chalkboard for me. I had two other sisters who my older sister gravitated towards both of those. And if it didn't have a ball, I wasn't interested in it. So I ended up deciding I wanted to play in college. I got recruited more for basketball than volleyball, but because that's more of what we played. The University of Montana offered for me to stay and play both sports, which was amazing. But I really wanted to get out of there. And I had an opportunity to try out for the junior Olympic team in Colorado Springs. And the San Diego State assistant coach happened to be there. So I ran to San Diego, having never been to San Diego, having never met the team or the coach or even seen the school. And so I redshirted my freshman year. And then, as you could probably see forecast, it wasn't a great fit. And with the coach, with the environment, and I ended up transferring and had the most amazing experience. Played 2 years at William & Mary in Virginia, played for a John Wooden kind of coach who ended up being in my wedding, who is still in my life today. So as I talk about in the book, I believe teachers and coaches, like parents, are so formative in who we become and why it's so powerful that our kids play sports and are supported the way that they deserve to be in now it is almost a $40 billion business. Youth sports is, and kids are starting at younger and younger ages, getting private coaching, playing club, traveling. And I've got 9 and 10-year-old clients that are traveling from Texas to Maryland for a U9 national championship. And I'm here to say it's not a thing. That's not what this experience is supposed to be about. And I believe there's not a single parent out there that's saying, let me screw up my kid. Of course not. We're all trying to do the best we can from where we are with what we've got, but sometimes we need some help. And fast forward, that's how this book came about. Was I ended up graduating from William & Mary. I moved to Europe after college. I found Nike over there, actually. They had an office in Vienna, Austria, and I showed up on their doorstep and they hired me. And I lived in Europe for 10 years, working for Nike for most of that, and then moved to world headquarters in Portland, Oregon. Met a cute guy in an Irish pub along the way who happened to be from Eugene, Oregon. And we both worked for Nike and raised our 3 kids throughout that whole process. And while I was raising the kids, all of a sudden I'm on the sidelines myself and seeing parents are like, well, you're not doing the rec thing, right? We're going to do club. And thinking, this doesn't feel right. And I think every parent, at least back in my day, when you got pregnant, someone would hand you what to expect when you're expecting. And it was like a nice warm blanket where you're like, oh, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. Every week of the pregnancy, I'm going to be the best parent. It gave you this sense of agency about, starting this new chapter in your life. And then you get to kick and chase or T-ball and you're standing next to somebody who, you don't recognize. And you say, is this the way this is supposed to be? Is this supposed to be this nuts? He's 5. I can't get him to decide what he wants for dinner. Why would I think that he knows what he wants to do in 6 months or 6 years? And so the book came about because, again, I don't have a PhD. It's just lived experience. And having been an athlete, having worked with the highest level of athletes at Nike, and then raising my own and our life experience, and then now being a coach for the last 10 years, coaching all my kids' sports, but then also being a life coach and a peak performance coach. I've kind of run the gamut and feel like I've worn every hat. So hopefully the book is, sounds like maybe it was to you if you listened to it twice, read it twice, some stories in there where you can be like, that's me. Or even if I don't do that, I recognize that behavior as something that I don't want my kids to see me do.
Yeah, I was thinking about your backstory as you were sharing it, and then you said, "Well, you don't have a degree," and I'm a big believer in experience is the best teacher. I think what most people are, right? And I'm listening to your backstory, and I'm like, oh, this is how you know so much. This is how you have such a 360-degree viewpoint of this. And you grew up in rural Montana, small town Montana. You're very familiar with Southern California, but you've been to Europe. So you're rural, you've been to big town, small town, you've been to Europe, you've coached, you played. So, I mean, you have as much experience in this area as anybody could. So that all adds up. That's interesting connection there too, because I was born in Eugene and you lived in Eugene, and I know you're from Montana, and I've told the listeners of this podcast I spent my summers in Montana. It's very formative. They had a minor league baseball team. I'd go there, and the Butte Copper Kings at the time.
That's
the
right.
Missoula has a team too. I forget their name, but Missoula didn't have a team at the time. But so how can parents support their child's athletic development? How can they help get them to a better place with their athletic development without pushing them too hard?
Well, let's start with the younger kids. So if you've got a child that's under 13, for sure under 9, I like to say focus on the 3 F's. When you're looking for, is it a rec team? Is it a YMCA league? Whatever it is you're doing, you want to focus on friends, fun, and fundamentals. When you're introducing your child to a sport, they need to know that this is about being in an organized structure, but they're going to make friends, they're going to have some fun, and they're going to learn some basic skills so that they can be better at. I like to say we are doing it all wrong in that clubs or teams will try to promote, well, we were the whatever champions of this league and that league. That's why you should come play for us. I think the standard should be, of the 10 kids you coached last year at U7 or U8, how many of them signed up next year? Because that's the bar of, I really enjoyed this. I'm curious. I want to learn more. I don't know if you're familiar with, but Coach Ballgame, James Lowe, he's got his work. And I had him on my podcast, Raising Athletes, a couple of years ago. And he talked about, he goes, I would have parents, he had one dad come up to me at a little Sandlot clinic and say, well, this is our last time. And he said, excuse me? He goes, we're going to give baseball one last shot. He said, I'm sorry? He's 5. Yeah, he's 5, but he's already had 2 really bad experiences and he doesn't want to be here today. Right? 5? You've already had 2 bad experiences that you think you've already written a sport off your books? No, parents, we need to make it fun. You need to find coaches that have your values. And that's what I say. I get that question a lot when I speak. Well, what if it's, you've got to be at this, in this certain division, because if you don't get in this club now, you'll never be where you want to be at 13. Focus on what your family values are. Focus on what matters to you as a family. And I don't think it's ever too young to have a family meeting. Okay, what do we want to do this summer? Let's map it out. We want to go camping with the cousins for 3 weeks, and we want to have, 1 week where we're offline. Okay, well, how does that line up with what the season looks like? Yeah, but if he's 8 and he misses 1 summer, is it over? Again, we get 18 summers with them. If they miss 1 summer at 8 or 9, it probably wasn't meant to be. And I'm not saying you got to it's easy to say, oh, yeah, I won't compete. And yes, as they get older, they need to be a part of it in order to develop. But when they're younger, particularly, keep them playing multiple sports. I talk about this a lot on my podcast. Try all the sports. Don't limit yourself. And one thing, and what I see right now is kids are burning out. 70% of kids are dropping out of all sport right now by age 13. Girls are dropping out at twice the rate of boys. Why? They're not having any fun. Why? Because we've sucked all the fun out of it. We've made it so intense at such a young age. And here's what happens, parents. And again, I don't think you're misguided. You see your kid, he has a proclivity for it. You're excited. They're excited. Maybe it's something you even played. So you get them the extra lessons. You get them on the higher team. Maybe they're even playing up a year or 2. It's all really, really exciting, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. Again, what I've seen a lot are kids that are 17, 18 who have the offer to go to college. I'm done. I wrote about it in the book, the golf story of the one kid who played golf all the way through. And I was talking to the dad and he said, I love golf. He loved golf at 5. We start playing on the Junior California Tour. Next thing you know, at 12, we're dragging the other 4 kids with us to every junior event. By 15, we won the parenting lottery. Stanford came calling. We were like, this is it. This is amazing. Until a couple weeks before he's supposed to leave for Stanford. And he says, Mom, Dad, I got to talk to you. I'm not going to Stanford and I'm never playing golf again. And I met him when his youngest son was playing basketball and he was leaning so far back in the stands. I was like, what's going on over here? And he just said, 5th kid. He's like, it needs to be his thing. Again, I don't think he messed up with the first. I'm not saying that he was a bad parent, but what I am saying is keep checking in, keep making sure that it's their dream and it's not they only want to make us happy. And when we express how proud we are of them because they're on the top team, because they got the full ride or whatever, they get the opportunity to go play, of course they're trying to make us happy. And a lot of parents will push back and say, yeah, no, it is their dream too. In fact, I had a gentleman yesterday I'm talking to, and his son's playing water polo D1. And he's like, no, it is his dream. He's like, but my voice is really loud in his ear. I said, well, that's good awareness. And now at 19, ask him, is this still your dream? Or is this my dream that you're living out?
I had a dad pull up to do pitching lessons. This was probably 15, 20 years ago. And he pulls up and he gets out. And I said, what do you want to work on? What does your son need to work on with his? He looks at me and goes, well, I just saw that the Major League Draft this last season, that the average first round draft signing bonus was 2.1 million. And I'm like, huh? And I'm looking at his son. I'm so what level? Well, he got cut from the JV team as a junior, or he's playing JV as a junior in high school at a like what would be considered like Division 8. And in Southern California, it goes opposite of most states, right? One is the highest or biggest. And so then I kept thinking of that. You have so many stories in your book, and every reader needs to go read the book. And Kirsten did not tell me to say this. I'm not plugging in terms of monetary. You got to read the book. Every parent, every coach should read it. That story is dwarfed by almost all of your stories. And I thought I was just taken aback. And then I hear the stories that you've heard. With that said, back to that topic that you were talking about right there. What are some signs as parents? What are some red flags or signs that we might see with our kids that would lead us to believe, or possibly could mean that they're burning out, or maybe there's even some resentment there?
Great question. So important. The number one thing I see is signs of anxiety that show up in a kid who used to love what they were doing, used to be the first one to the practice, used to want to have all the extra sessions. And now what's happening is as you go up the ladder, it gets more and more narrow. The competition gets steeper and steeper. And so a child who may have dominated prepubescently, right, now is hitting puberty and maybe behind, or, is maybe just not quite at the level of some of their peers now. And so the pressure that they feel internally to be that top athlete, because that's all they've ever known, becomes really overwhelming. In fact, I had a client a couple of years ago, very good soccer player, was getting recruited by many D1 across the United States. And when the mom called, she said, well, it's the weirdest thing. We're on vacation. She's had a complete panic attack. She had a meltdown. In fact, she throws up in front of before most of her games. And I thought, oh no. And when you sit with her, I love soccer. It's my passion. It's all I want to do. And I was like, okay, so what do we think's going on? Well, the backstory was the dad was texting her during her games. And I'm like, how does that work? Well, yeah, every time there's a timeout, my dad is saying, and I have to go over to my backpack and I open my bag and I look at my phone. Why did I even bother coming? What? That pressure that they're feeling to perform, parents think about it as if, what if you were at work and you have somebody that's constant? Is that the best effort you can give? Is that all you're going to do in that presentation? It's that henpecking that can be death by 1,000 paper cuts. They start to feel overwhelmed. And human nature is, when we get overwhelmed, for safety reasons, we opt out, or we get an injury, we hyperventilate, we throw up, we find ways to protect ourselves. And even when they want it themselves, and that's what the parents are like, no, she really still loves it. Well, something has now been built up in her that's saying, this is scary. What if I give my best? And she might even be thinking this consciously. What if I give my best, I'm not enough, right? So if I don't give my best, what if I don't have to compete? And sure enough, that same athlete had an offer from the top university and was supposed to go play in front of them right before they wanted to make her an offer. And she pulled her hamstring. And she was like, she basically admitted it was like, that was the way I stayed safe, because I knew if they didn't offer me, my dad would be so disappointed in me. So signs of withdrawal, things that are like, I'm not so interested in getting the extra pitching, or not going to the batting cages, or not, showing like what comes across as disinterest, doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interested anymore, but they're eating differently, they're sleeping differently, they're withdrawing from things. And I think the best parenting advice I've ever heard is parents, we need to have 90 1-minute conversations with our kids, not one 90-minute conversation. Check in. How are you feeling about this? Do you still want to play in college? Is this your dream? I know this is what you wanted before, but if you don't want to do this, Dad and I are great with you not doing this. Of course, there's some parents that would say, no, I want her to do this. And that's where we have to realize we have to separate our ego from theirs. This is not our journey. This is their journey. And even if you did play at that high level, and a dad called me the other day, played in the NFL for 12 years, and he said, your book has changed my life. I was like, excuse me? And he said, I've been doing it wrong. He's like, I've got a 10 and an 8-year-old, and I'm that dad in the car ride home. And he goes, I know better. I played in the NFL for 12 years. Why am I behaving this way? So if you're doing that, or even if you're feeling that way, it's okay. There's never too late. I believe never too late a time to repair with your child. But first step is, oh, that's me. I'm doing that. I'm putting too much pressure. I'm not allowing the child to drive the process. Doesn't mean that you don't coach them with it. Doesn't mean the frontal lobe is wide open, particularly for boys. The frontal lobe doesn't come online till the mid-20s, I'm afraid to say. And I got a almost 25-year-old, and it's just starting to really fire. The girls come on a little earlier, maybe 18, 19, 20. But executive functioning, decision-making, following through on obligations, all of those things where you're like, I've told you 5 times, if I've told you once, that drive you crazy, that's actually not them telling you they don't want it. It's their brains not actually having the circuitry it needs yet to help them follow through. So you've got to kind of walk that balance to make sure that you're supporting them, but not controlling everything that they do.
Give me your take on this. So I got a daughter. She's younger. She's doing volleyball. What's your thought on this? I will often say, do you want to go out in the front yard and do some bumps and some, some overhand passes and some serves? And then I just kind of watch her reaction. If it's yeah, then we go outside. If it's hesitant at all, I back off. What are your thoughts on that?
How old is she?
8.
Okay, yeah. Offering it to her. And/or maybe you don't start with, let's go play Pepper. Maybe, hey, let's just go do something fun together that she would like whatever, and jump rope or hopscotch or whatever, go ride our bikes. And then once her body's moving, then you get out the ball and, hey, let's just pepper a little bit, right? Like sometimes from 0 to 100 is a big step for an 8-year-old. But a lot of times once they get going, they're like, sure, I want to do this. But when it's like, oh, you mean getting off the couch and going outside is like a bigger hurdle. But kind of once they're in the moment, they kind of enjoy it.
Okay, I like that. Tie it on to something else, kind of add it on. I like that.
Because they're smart and they're like, oh, Dad wants me to practice, right? Even if she doesn't articulate that out loud. But if it's Dad wants me to be what we want, and we want to raise athletes for life. Whatever age she stops competing, we want her to go to the gym. We want her to go for a run. We want to go for a hike. We want you to be, because what we know are particularly girls, women who are 23 to 25, who are still active, become much more active, less depression, less anxiety over their lives, able to make better decisions. 94% of women who are in the C-suite played sports. So, honey, I want you to be active because I want you to be able to be physically strong and capable and know who you are and know your body. Whether it's volleyball or not, I don't care. But we're going to do a bunch of different things so that you learn how to use your body in different ways, so that you realize you have control over yourself. You have agency, you have decision-making skills, and that's going to project into her 20s, 30s, 40s as I am an athlete. I love the Nike motto, which is, if you have a body, you are an athlete. We are all athletes. And when we see ourselves that way, we make different food choices, we sleep better, we take care of ourselves. All of those lead to better lifelong decisions, which is why we care about them playing, why youth sports are so important.
I kind of think back to your story in your book about the airplane, and I'm not going to share the story. If you want to hear it, it's crazy. Read the book. It was the airplane banner over the field, and I'm like, how are people thinking? How do parents even think that? Like, what planet are you living on to think that's okay? With that said, what role that they should play in their child's sports and experience, and where should they draw the line?
If I can do a little plug on my website, Kirsten Jones Inc., you can go on there and I have a do's and don'ts for sports parents. You can download that. It has a bunch of them. I won't go into all of them now, but do's are recognizing, separating yourself from the kids. One of the best gifts of COVID, I believe, was a lot of clubs stopped allowing the parents come to practice. Like we've gotten so intertwined with our kids, and I know parents that say, well, I have to go. I have to be at all the practices. I have to be at all the, they're watching everything we do. You may think they're like, peanuts and wah, 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 wah. They're not listening, but they're taking notes and they're saying, okay, so first of all, checking in with yourself. What's my morning routine? What am I doing for sleep? What am I doing for meditation or prayer? Or how am I setting up my day for success? And even if your teenager particularly is rolling their eyes at you and doing none of it, again, I've got now a 24 and 21-year-old and literally like they're coming around and they're like, wow, Mom, you've been doing this for years. And we always thought it was like, whatever, but eating Chick-fil-A every day isn't a good idea. You're like, you think? So some of it we just need to model for a long time. And again, parents, I'm not saying we need to be perfect. No, in fact, we need to model that we're not perfect and give them permission to say, oh, wow, I got cut. I'm not getting playing time. You know what? I have a presentation today. It did not go the way I thought. I pitched this book to over 100 publishers. It took me 7 years to write this book. There was part of me that just wrote it just out of again, I felt I had something to say and I wanted to get it out there, but also I want to show my kids that I can do hard things too. Whether anybody reads it or not, it's not about the result, it's about the process. And that's what we want them to buy into. So parents, at games, cheer for others. Cheer louder for the other kids than you do for your own. Never cheer against the other kids. And I know this comes from our pro sports where we're so for our team and it's totally condoned to cheer against the other team. But they're 8 and they're standing at the plate feeling like the world is staring at them. The last thing we need is, hooray, they struck out, right? So think about it from their perspective. One of the challenges I give myself is after every game I watch of my kids is find somebody on the other team who had a great play or made a great save and go up and congratulate them. Say, wow, that was really fun to watch you play today. I guarantee you they will remember that for the rest of and what does it cost you? 2 seconds of your time. And by the way, parents, the car ride home is the most dreaded time in a child's existence. I have a big chapter in there on that as well. But the only 6 words they need to hear us say, I love to watch you play. Wow, that was fun to see you out there today. And if they weren't playing, I think you're a great teammate. I saw you high five your teammate when they came in. There are things we can say in support of the attitude, the energy, the emotion. I talk a lot about the 10 things that don't require talent: attitude, energy, eye contact, body language, effort, being on time. Those are skills that are going to make them marketable for the rest of their lives. Every coach, every professor, every boss, every mate, spouse will love to have somebody that's going to do all of those things. And it's not about your size. It's not about your batting average. It's not about any of those things. Those are just life skills that are going to make them very, very successful in life, I believe.
100%. That's such a tiny percent of players will ever play professionally, much less collegiately. And you talk about those percentages in your book. It's minuscule.
And we all want our kids to win, and I get it. I'm as competitive as the day is long. So it's not that. So tips for parents who are super competitive: talk to your neighbor, go take a lap if you need to, right? Distance yourself. And I do have some parents that are like, the parents can't sit together. Some dad will go stand on the third base line. If you know that about yourself, the kids know too, right? And they hear you. They hear you loud and clear. And I know a lot of kids will say, oh, I can definitely hear my parents' voice, them yelling the loudest, and it's embarrassing. So be aware. Again, just challenge yourself for the next outing to listen to yourself. And what am I sharing? And is it positive? And is it helpful to the situation? Because they're going to remember.
They're going to remember that ride home for sure. And I loved watching you play. And you know what? Sounds cheesy, but I actually said it out loud 2 or 3 times
reading your book, I said it out loud because I thought I got to just have, I said, and I don't do that a lot, but I'm like, I got to program this into my brain. I loved watching you play.
Well, and for parents who played and know the game, then okay, I get it. It's tempting because you know how to help them. So here's a tip. The car ride home that was great. You want to stop for ice cream? And then when you get home or the next morning, let me know. And my husband does this so brilliantly with my sons because he played basketball and he would say, "Do you want me to be your dad or would you like some feedback from a coach's perspective?" And my middle one will always be like, "Yeah, I'm good." My oldest one would be like, "No. Give me the feedback." So you're asking them for their permission to share. And then you have to be okay with them saying no. If they say, "Yeah, I don't want to hear from you," that's great. It was fun to watch you. But most kids, of course, are going to be curious. What we do, though, is we assume that they're going to want to hear the feedback, and here I'm going to deliver it to you, right? So ask permission, and once granted, then say, "Hey, these are the three things I was thinking of." I had overnight to think about it, so while you're having your breakfast, these are the three things if you're looking for feedback. But not 20 minutes after the game, not right not when it's still fresh, never about a teammate. I don't care how bad the refs were. Yeah, it was unfortunate. Maybe we had a couple calls, didn't go our way. Fine. But when we start blaming everybody else about our results, then that's what they're going to know is, okay, well, I don't really have to take accountability for what happened, right? It's simple advice. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy to do, but I think the key is to listen to folks like yourself and listen to this podcast, listen to your podcast, read your book, because that starts to change our paradigm and almost our operating system. It takes time. And what's your thoughts on that? And also, have you seen parents that played? I would think parents that played at a high level would be a little more understanding and they would have less ignorance on this. Is that the case? But you did mention the NFL player of 12 years. So it's not black and white. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Keeping the love for the game. I live in LA, as we mentioned, and the Dodgers won this last year. And Freddie Freeman had these beautiful segments about he still plays catch with his dad to this day, right? Like that's still his favorite thing to do. And you hear a lot of those kind of stories of the ones that are able, A, they have a lot of gifts, B, they work very, very hard, C, they have things go the right way. But it also comes from such a place of joy and curiosity. Steph Curry talks a lot about that too. Like he's just always curious. Tom Brady was that way. Like it wasn't about the outcome. It was always about the process and how can I get better? And they were the ones asking. Tiger Woods was the same. You hear those guys talking about how they drove the process. It wasn't a parent. Yes, you had parents that were there to help line things up for them. But I would say as a parent too, be thinking about, and those of you who are coaching your kids, be very careful because, again, I have had 3 men in the last month reach out saying, I was a nightmare. And the one dad was a football coach. He said, I coached at a very exclusive high school in Denver and we won everything. And my son was by far the best kid on the team. And one day the phone rang after the game and it was a mom of a kid who didn't play. And I thought, oh, here's the mom. She's going to complain about playing time. And she called, said, I'm just so grateful. We're so grateful. Ryan's even on the team. This has just been a great season, but I was just wondering if I could give you a little feedback. And he said, sure. And she said, your son is by far the best player we have. And we see you basically humiliating him in front of all of his teammates. And you don't need to do that. He's already the hardest working kid with the most talent who's giving it all. And he said, that just stopped me in my tracks because, good on her for having the guts to say something. And then I said, good on him for owning it and holding up his hand and saying, I'm doing it wrong. So it's never too late, parents. If you are one of the dads that's coaching, again, kudos to you for taking the time. It's a lot of work. I've done it. It's hard. It's thankless at sometimes. It's amazing on other times. But make sure you understand what tone you're giving not only to the other children, but to your child as well, so that their experience can be not only, that's their dad, that's their mom. They want to be proud and they want to know that they're making you proud.
All right, that wraps up part 1 of our interview with Kirsten Jones. Highly recommend reading her book, part 2. The second 30 minutes of the interview will be coming out in next week's episode. So I look forward to having you back for our weekly get-together where we check in to become more successful coaches each week. We should all be proud of ourselves for being coaches. We shouldn't expect to be perfect. We should just go out there with the goal of improving every practice, every game, and keeping the main things the main things. All right, everyone, you're going to want to hear part 2. Part 2 is just as good as part 1 with Kirsten Jones. Let's think about how we can use all the tips she shared with us in part 1 with our players, with our team's parents, because as the parents go, the team goes, and as the culture goes, the season goes. So put these into play. Until next week, let's keep taking care of our health so we can be at our best for our family, our close friends. And let's keep going out there and trying to be great coaches. Have fun, keep it in perspective, and y'all take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. We got this. Now, let's take the field.